Hello, YouTube. Thought I'd do a quick video here. Some good news. Good news. My USB DB9 adapter does work with the Raspberry Pi. Now, before we get into this, I want to mention a couple things. One, I'm going to try to keep this video kind of, hopefully not too long. If it gets to be too long, I apologize. But I got a lot of information to say. All the information I'm going to say and all the links and the link to download the image file, all that is going to be on my forum under the Raspberry Pi category. So go there to download the image file. Now, let me explain. Now, this part, this video is going to be kind of like a two-part here. Meaning, the beginning part, I'm going to talk about the hardware, and then the second part, I'm going to talk about the Raspberry Pi and what you will see when you boot up your Raspberry Pi. Okay, so it might be a little long video. I apologize, but I just want to get this information out there for you. So, when you do get a USB DB9 adapter, it's got to say, either in the title or in the description, FTDI. If it does not say that anywhere at all, that cable will not work. Let me say that one more time. If you want to buy a cable to hook up your Raspberry Pi to the interface board so you can use it with your repeater, the cable has got to say in the description or title FTDI. It may not say chipset after that. It may just say FTDI. If you have that cable, you should be good to go. The driver will automatically already be installed on the image file, which is good news. You don't have to worry about installing the driver. It should be all set for you. So, you got to have that cable, and you're going to need a USB sound card, because that's the cables from the interface board plug in that sound card. There's no driver for the sound card. You can use any sound card, I believe. I'm using a cheap one, and it seemed to work just fine. Now, for this purpose of the video, I do have a HDMI cable hooked up, and I do have a USB keyboard and a USB mouse hooked up. Once you get this set up, you don't need those hooked up anymore, unless you want to go in there and change settings. You won't need it. Now, but that's how I have this set up. So now I have the repeater hooked up to a dummy load. You can't see that, but that's hooked up. Of course, I got the interface board plugged in, and this is the Raspberry Pi 3B Plus. So let's talk about the Raspberry Pi here briefly. Now, like I said, this is the 3B Plus. The image that I'm going to be sharing will be for a 3B Plus. Will it work with a Raspberry 4? Will the image work with a Raspberry 4? I do not know. I don't have one here. If someone out there wants to try it and let me know, that'd be great. Post a comment in the description below that it works. If it doesn't work, I will have to get me a Raspberry Pi 4, and I'll have to make an image for one. Now, you're probably wondering, well, what's the difference between a Raspberry B Plus, 3B Plus to a Raspberry 4? Well, Raspberry 4 offers more memory, more RAM. And again, like any computer, the more RAM you have in there, the faster it's going to run. So that's kind of the advantage of the Raspberry 4. I believe you can get a Raspberry 4 with 2 gig RAM, 4 gig, and 8 gig, I believe. Of course, the price goes up, the higher you go. The Raspberry 3B Plus only comes with 1 gig of RAM, if I remember correctly. So that's one of the differences. Now, when you do get a Raspberry Pi, it may not come with a enclosure. You can buy them just a circuit board. I think you can buy a Raspberry 3B Plus without the case for like $35. Then you got to buy your memory card, which is not a bad price. But keep this in mind. You might want to get a case for it, because in this particular one, I have a heat sink on the processor chip to help keep the Raspberry Pi cool. Now, we're not doing a lot of computing power here, so it shouldn't get too hot, but it doesn't hurt to have a heat sink on there. So keep that in mind when you order a Raspberry Pi. Does it come with a case? Does the case have a heat sink? You might want to ask the seller, hey, what we know, there's no pictures of it. then it does not come with the case. So that's what you want to keep in mind. So now, and the Raspberry Pi don't take much power. That's the beauty of it. You're probably saying, well, why would I want to run a Raspberry Pi with my repeater? What's the advantage of it? Well, there's a couple of advantages. One, when it's all set up, it's one little box. There's no display. It's smaller than a laptop. It takes less power than a laptop. So, for instance, a good example is, let's say you just want date and time, and you want repeater, your repeater to ID itself, and you got a repeater on a hillside on a solar panel. You don't want to leave a laptop up there, so you leave a Raspberry Pi hooked up. Of course, I kind of got a mess here of wires, but you kind of get the point here. You'll be able to make all this be nice and tidy, and it will automatically run its repeater ID all by itself. Now, that's one advantage of it. So, let me go ahead and explain the couple things that will not work with the Raspberry Pi when running Windows. The built-in Wi-Fi will not work. If you buy a USB Wi-Fi card, it will not work because you need an ARM driver for it. Now, it's not terrible because this does have a Cat5 connector for an Ether cable. Now, you're probably thinking, well, what good is that going to do me if I have a hotspot? Well, I believe some hotspots do have a Cat5 capabilities. You can plug in a Cat5 cable, I believe. So you can go that route. Now, do you need internet to run your date and time and repeater ID? No, you do not. The only time you're going to need internet is if you want Zello, if you want weather announcements, or you want the AnyDesk remote access software to work. If you don't need none of that, you can run your date and time and repeater ID, or just date and time or just repeater ID, whichever one you want. And you do not need internet for that. Now, one thing I want to mention here, and I want to be clear about, I could not find a COM port sharing software that works with Windows 10 ARM version. So that means you cannot run 3 programs that require COM port usage at the same time. You can only run 1. So, for an example, if you just want to run Zello by itself, then you can run Zello all by itself. If you want to run date and time all by itself, then you can run date and time all by itself. If you want to run repeater ID by itself, you can run repeater ID all by itself. But you cannot run all 3 of those at the same time because I cannot find a COM port sharing software that will work. If somebody out there finds one, please post a comment below. That would be great. So, not terrible. That's not terrible, but it's something that we have to deal with. So now, when you write the image, let me explain this image here quickly. It's a 16 gig image. So that means you're going to need a 16 gig micro SD card. That SD card should have a class 10 marking on it. What that means is that it's the highest read-write speed that's available. And that's what you want, because this micro SD card is literally the hard drive for your Raspberry Pi. So you want to be able to read and write fast. So make sure if you go buy a micro SD card, it has a class 10 label on it. Now, it's got to be 16 gig minimum, because that's the size I had here when I did this. Now, I'm going to post the link to download this. Now, I'm going to be honest here. I don't know how well my hosting service is going to let people download I did zip it. I used WinZip to zip it up. I went from 16 gig to about 7 gig. So, I don't know if it's going to download good, fast, slow. I don't know. They may even cut it off and may not let you download it. If that happens, let me know and I'll try to come up with a solution. Now, I did order a 8 gig SD card to see if I could fit all this on an 8 gig so that I could I can zip an 8 gig, and maybe I'll get that down to 2 gig. So I did order one, but for the time being, you got to use a 16 gig. That's what I have on here. Now, will that work with the Raspberry 4? I do not know. Let me know, and if it don't, then I'll have to make one. But the problem is, I don't have a Raspberry 4 here at this time to make an image for you guys. Now, the advantage of an image file is it's ready to go. Okay? What I mean by that is, when you write the image to your micro SD card and you plug it into your Raspberry Pi and you boot it up, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to show you exactly how this should work. So let's go ahead. We're going to turn on, we're going to boot up the Raspberry Pi, and it's going to boot right up to Windows. It's going to load the date and time automatically, because I had that box checked, and it's going to load the AnyDesk at the same time for remote access. Okay? Now, I didn't have time. I didn't check everything on here. And what I mean by that is, I didn't try the Zello. I didn't try the AnyDesk. Maybe when that's hooked up to the internet, maybe it's going to be, this Raspberry Pi might be too slow for that. I don't know. I do know, though, when I did plug in the CAD5 cable, it did kind of slow down my, it kind of made it be a little laggy. And I think because that was happening, because I think Windows was trying to update. But you can turn that off. You can play with it. You can experiment with it. But I don't know how well the Zello and the AnyDesk is going to work. Hopefully it works fairly decent. But again, that can be solved by the Raspberry 4 with more RAM would solve that problem. So when you plug this in, this is how exactly it's going to act. It's going to boot up automatically to Windows. There's no password. It's going to load the AnyDesk in the background, and it's going to load date and time in the background. And you can change that if you want. If you don't want that to load, then you can go in there and undo that. But that's how I have it set. Okay? Now, while this is loading, I want to, and maybe I already mentioned this. Maybe I haven't. I don't know. But for AnyDesk, Zello, and weather announcements, you do need internet. If you don't care about those, then you do not need internet. Like your date and time and repeater ID, you don't need internet. Now, what's kind of neat here, and I did a video about this, the Simplex repeater software I have on here does have the capabilities to do DTMF tones. Now, I'll post a link to that video. So you could use your keypad on your mobile or your handheld to do certain functions on that. So I'll post a link to that video in the description below. So that's one kind of cool thing about it. Now this is still loading, but as you can see, it boots right up. If you plug in your USB DB9 and your USB sound card before you turn on your Raspberry Pi, I'm hoping it will still use the same COM port that I already have set in here. If not, it's easy to change. It's not that hard. I'll show you once this gets all loaded. So now it's going to load the AnyDesk, and it's going to load the date and time. And the beauty of that is, let's say the power goes out and it reboots itself. It's going to automatically load that for you. You don't have to worry about, oh great, I got to go over there and load all this. See how it's calling up the date and time already? And it's going to call that up. It's running the AnyDesk in the background. It's calling all this up. And voila, man, we're almost done here. It's all booted up, ready to go. This is how it should look on your screen. Okay? So now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you, if you need to change a COM port, you can go here and change it. All these check boxes you leave alone. All right, got them all set for you. If you don't want the date and time to play, uncheck these. If you want the date and time to play along with a message, then you can make a pre-recorded audio file, a WAV file, and you can check this box and have it play before it does a date and time, or you can check this box to have it play after the date and time, if you choose to have date and time enabled. So you can do this. This software can do your repeater ID and date and time all in one. That's what I'm basically saying. Because remember, we cannot run more than one program when it comes to COM port sharing. We can run more than one program that's not related to COM ports, like the AnyDesk that you'll see down here. I can run that because that doesn't use a COM port, so that's no problem. But for COM port sharing, you can only run one at a time. Now, here's what I got loaded on here for you guys. I got AnyDesk, and you're probably wondering, well, what is that for? Well, that's for, let's say, for an example, you do have internet hooked up, and you want to remote access into your Raspberry Pi to adjust sound, or maybe to stop and start programs. That's the purpose of the AnyDesk. It gives you remote access to your Raspberry Pi so that you can do whatever you got to do. Simplex repeater software, you can use that for your repeater ID, or you can also enable tones and have it do certain functions. I did a video on that. I'll post that video down below. Obviously, date and time is also on here. We got Zello, and we have the config file already shortcut for you, because remember, you got to put Zello in gateway mode to be able to use Zello with my interface board. And then we have a shortcut to the sound settings. So if you need to adjust your sound, then you can go ahead and get it. It's a shortcut right to there. This is what you should get when you boot up your Raspberry Pi, just like this. If you need to adjust, if you need to change your COM port, you go here. Okay? So how does it sound? Well, let's find out. Honestly, I just got this cable in, and I am just, for the first time doing this, have everything up and running after a reboot. So let's go ahead and see. I got a handheld here. Let's hit play.
Saturday, November 25, 2020.
Well, I don't sound too bad at all. I could probably tweak the sound, but that don't sound bad at all. And I got that set to play every 15 minutes, as you can see here. Or I can change that. But yeah, it sounds pretty good.
Saturday, November 25.
And to show you,
Time is 3:06 p.m.
to show you, if I go back to, let's do this here. I got too many mouses here. Let's go back to this. And if you watch on the Raspberry Pi, when I hit that, it's going to flash and blink when it's playing the date and time. Let me go ahead and do this. Oh, I keyed up too many mouses here.
Saturday, November.
And if you can see that flashing or not. So it's playing, working great. There's a green light on the interface board. No, it's shut off. That's just like it should. So yeah, it seemed to work pretty good. Now, truth be told, I haven't tried Zello yet on here. I'll leave that up to you guys. You just got to log in with your credentials with Zello and put it in gateway mode, like I've showed you. It may be doggy. I don't know. Like I said, I did hook up the Cat 5 cable, and it seemed to be kind of made this little doggy. But Raspberry 3B Plus will work just fine for date and time and weather, or not weather, date and time and repeater ID announcements. It works just fine. It may even work just fine for weather. I haven't tried that yet. But definitely date and time and repeater ID, it'll work just fine for this. So at any rate, all this information will be on the forum under the category Raspberry Pi. If you have any questions or comments, please post them down below. Please subscribe. Thank you and have a good day.